Well, I think that we could start with the official explanation. The Trump White House is saying that they were only made aware of the Israeli mission while the planes were in the air. It was impossible to call it off. And Israel is insisting that this was an attack carried out entirely using its own resources. Now, there's reasons to question the credibility of both governments when they're speaking on issues like this. And there is a question of how do Israeli jets travel the distance necessary with air-to-air refueling? How do they, which airspace do they transit? Some of the planes had stealth technology, which might conceal them from Saudi or other Gulf state air defenses, but the F-15 planes should be visible. So there may have been a greater level of coordination, not just with the United States, but with the with other regional allies than is being is being expressed at the moment. So I would start with that, and then the question leads to in whose interests is carrying out such an attack? What purpose does it serve? Well, it certainly calls into question the strength and validity of security guarantees offered by the United States. As you point out, Qatar is one of the most important American allies, the greatest non-NATO ally that the United States has. Al Udeid Air Base is absolutely crucial to the projection of power in the region when there's attacks made against forces in Iraq or in Iran, then Al Udeid Air Base is the infrastructure that's essential to those types of operations. And what we're seeing is that the United States is either unwilling to restrain Israel or unable to um, prevent its own technology, because these are American planes sold to Israel, from being used against its own allies. Now, I think it's entirely natural for every state in the region, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, all of which have very close relationships with the United States. Countries like Kuwait, which was with the sovereignty of which, the independence of which was rescued during the first Gulf War by the United States. All of these countries have to rethink what their security arrangements means if Israel is able to carry out attacks like this with impunity. And certainly, despite the disappointment expressed by President Trump, there's no indication that there will be any consequences for Israel carrying out these attacks in breach of not only international law, which of course is usual operating procedure for Israel, but also against the U.S.-led security order. In such a case, I think that it would be natural for regional powers to seek to realign. The question is which countries could potentially step into that role. I think the United States is not prepared for a reordering of the political and security arrangements in the Middle East. It takes for granted its role, and it believes that states like Qatar have no alternative but to continue to rely on American protection. And indeed, as you point out, 20,000 troops that are today guests may have a less friendly role in the future if Qatar begins to assert on more independent, less pro-American foreign policy. I think that what we see is that Israel can act with impunity against any regional security threats that it authorizes unilaterally. It moved against Hezbollah in Lebanon, in that a series of sudden strikes, the pager attacks, the walkie-talkie attacks, and followed by conventional ground assault. It has moved into seized territory in Syria as well, despite attempts by the new government in Syria to reset relations after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. The Um, it also managed to convince the United States to carry out attacks against Iranian nuclear facilities. So it seems as though the security order in the region is entirely being remade according to Israeli priorities. And unfortunately, the most immediate priority is the terminal resolution of the Gaza campaign through the resettlement or removal of the Palestinian population. That's been a proposal that President Trump himself forwarded at the beginning of the year, and it was met with disbelief when it was presented, but it's um, rapidly becoming a reality. And given um, the fact that we're talking about the attack on Qatar today, but there's also the ongoing strikes against Gaza City, the removal of 1 million residents in order to reduce the entire urban area to rubble. And it seems as though there's there's no ability to prevent the wholesale removal of the population of Gaza. Yes, absolutely. Right now, Russia is preparing for a major military exercise with its Belarusian ally in the territory of Belarus, not far from Poland and the Baltic states, Zapad 2025. The That exercise, which is bringing in tens of thousands of Russian troops into contact with the borders of NATO, that exercise is slated to begin on Saturday. And this may very well be one of the first elements of that exercise. And the invasion of Ukraine was presaged by a similar Zapad exercise on Russian and Belarusian territory. I think that together with the attack on Qatar, this probing attempt against Polish airspace, although the drones are reported to have been Shahed design Iranian kamikaze drones, there's been no damage and no reported casualties, no serious damage, just one house in the countryside was victim to some debris. The bigger risk is to the credibility and the unity of the NATO alliance. This technically calls for the invocation of Article 5, which states that an attack on any member state is an attack on every member state, including the US. And failure to take serious action will undermine the American security guarantees in Europe, just as Qatar has undermined those in the Middle East. I think that that's inevitable. The old order has been fatally undermined by the collapse of many of the post-colonial secular pan-Arabist states, Ba'athist Iraq, Ba'athist Syria. There's been turbulence in Egypt with the brief period of Muslim Brotherhood rule, followed by the return of military dictatorship. The Libyan state has collapsed, and now there's a patchwork of different factions fighting for control. Without strong centers of authority, then independent groups, warlords, groups such as ISIS are able to operate and redraw borders as they see fit. We're seeing an inversion of that in the Israeli project to absorb more territory around its own borders and clear the local population for settlement. The maps are already being redrawn, and we don't know where that will end.